Harmony Station buzzed with the usual chaos of intergalactic commerce when Rex Sullivan walked into the cantina with grease under his fingernails and irritation written across his weathered face. His cargo hauler had been delayed 3 hours because some bureaucrat insisted on inspecting every bolt and wire in his ship's engine compartment. The human engineer grabbed a bottle of Earth whiskey from the bartender and found an empty stool near the back wall where he could watch the diverse crowd of alien species conducting their business. The station served as neutral ground for hundreds of different civilizations, and Rex had learned to appreciate the strange beauty of so many different forms of life coexisting in one place. That peaceful moment shattered when Admiral Kef Zoran's voice boomed across the cantina like a war horn. These primitive mammals dare call themselves civilized, the Valorian commander announced to his entourage of junior officers. Humanity stumbled into space, travel through pure accident, and now they sit at the Galactic Council table pretending they belong among true sapient species. Rex took a long sip of whiskey and tried to ignore the familiar sting of prejudice several other patrons had turned to watch the scene unfold while the Valorian contingent grew louder and more obnoxious with each passing minute. Their technology is crude, their culture is barbaric, and their problem-solving methods are laughably simplistic. Zoran continued, his voice dripping with contempt. Any species that still uses projectile weapons and chemical propulsion has no business representing itself as advanced. The human engineer felt his jaw tighten as he listened to the verbal assault Valorians prided themselves on being the galaxy's premier warrior scholars combining military might with intellectual superiority. They had ruled vast sectors of space for millennia and looked down on younger species like disapproving parents. I heard they actually use something called duct tape to repair their starships, one of Zoran's officers added with a laugh. Imagine trusting your life to adhesive strips when proper quantum welding exists. That comment pushed Rex over the edge because duct tape had saved his life more times than he could count. He stood up from his stool and walked toward the Valorian table with deliberate steps. "Excuse me, Admiral," Rex said in a calm voice that carried just a hint of challenge. "Did you say something about human problem-solving methods being simplistic?" Zoran turned to face the approaching human, his 4 eyes gleaming with predatory interest. The Valorian stood nearly 8 feet tall with sleek blue-black skin and ceremonial battle armor that proclaimed his high rank, a representative of the species in question. Zoran replied with mock politeness, "Yes, I was just explaining to my officers how humanity's primitive approach to complex challenges demonstrates their fundamental unsuitability for galactic civilization." Rex nodded thoughtfully and took another drink from his bottle. "Interesting perspective. Admiral, would you mind if I demonstrated one of those primitive human methods?" The cantina had grown quiet as other patrons sensed potential. Conflict-brewing Valorians were known for their hair-trigger tempers, and humans had developed a reputation for unpredictable behavior. "By all means," Zoran said with an expansive gesture. "Please show us your barbaric techniques." Rex walked over to a nearby wall panel that had been flickering erratically for months. The quantum resonance shield generators that protected Harmony Station had been experiencing cascade failures that left sections of the facility vulnerable to radiation exposure. Teams of Valorian engineers had spent weeks analyzing the problem, using advanced mathematical models and sophisticated diagnostic equipment. They had concluded that the shield network required complete replacement at enormous cost. "Hold my beer," Rex said casually, handing his bottle to a surprised alien patron. He pulled a sonic screwdriver from his tool belt and began examining the panel connections while humming an old Earth song. The diagnostic display showed the same error codes that had baffled the Valorians for months. Rex traced the power conduits with his fingers, following pathways that the official schematics claimed were properly configured. He found what he was looking for behind a secondary junction box where someone had installed a feedback loop that was causing harmonic interference. "There's your problem," he announced, pulling out a roll of duct tape. The watching crowd murmured with confusion as Rex carefully wrapped the tape around a specific connector that had been vibrating loose due to the harmonic resonance. He adjusted the positioning 3 times until the flickering display stabilized. The shield strength indicators climbed from 60% to full power within seconds. The error codes disappeared, and the system began running smoothly for the first time in months. Impossible. Zoran breathed, staring at the normalized readings. My engineers analyzed every component in that network. Rex retrieved his beer and took a celebratory drink. Your engineers looked at the problem like engineers, Admiral. They ran diagnostics and calculated theoretical solutions and built mathematical models. But sometimes you just need to find the loose connection and tighten it up. The human's casual dismissal of months of Valorian expertise struck the Admiral like a physical blow. His officers looked embarrassed and confused as they watched Rex's simple solution continue working perfectly. You got lucky. Zoran snarled, his composure cracking. Any primitive can stumble onto a correct answer by accident. Rex shrugged. Maybe so, Admiral. But I've got a whole species of primitives back home who stumble onto correct answers pretty regularly. We're funny that way. The cantina erupted in nervous laughter as other species recognized the subtle insult. Valorians hated being dismissed as irrelevant almost as much as they hated being wrong about technical matters. You dare mock the Valorian Empire, Zoran roared, drawing himself up to his full intimidating height. We have mastered sciences that your species cannot even comprehend. Then prove it, Rex replied with infuriating calm. If human methods are so primitive and Valorian science is so advanced, then surely you can demonstrate your superiority. The challenge hung in the air like a loaded weapon while Zoran's officers held their breath. Everyone in the cantina understood that Valorian honor had been publicly questioned, and the Admiral would have to respond. Very well, human, Zoran said through gritted teeth. I formally challenge your species to prove their worth. The galaxy faces 3 impossible crises that have stumped our greatest minds. If humanity can solve these challenges, we will acknowledge your competence. If you fail, Earth will be expelled from the Galactic Council and humanity will return to the primitive isolation where it belongs. Rex felt the weight of an entire species' future settling on his shoulders, but the whiskey and his natural stubbornness kept him steady. What kind of challenges, Admiral? Zoran smiled coldly. First, the screaming stars of Nebula 7 have been driving exploration teams insane for 50 years. Second, the infinite maze of planet recursion has trapped dozens of expeditions in a reality loop that defies mathematical analysis. Third, the 3-way war between the apex hunters, crystal communes, and void wanderers has resisted every diplomatic solution for 2 centuries. The human engineer considered these challenges while finishing his drink. Each problem sounded genuinely dangerous and complex, but something about the way Zoran described them suggested they might be more manageable than they appeared. Interesting choices, Admiral, Rex said finally. I accept your challenge on behalf of humanity. A collective gasp arose from the watching crowd as they realized the implications of what had just occurred. The fate of an entire species now rested on one human's ability to solve 3 impossible problems. Rex walked back to his table and sat down to finish his drink while the cantina buzzed with excited conversation. Zoran and his officers huddled together planning their next moves. What the Admiral didn't know was that Rex Sullivan had been fixing impossible problems his entire life. Growing up on a frontier colony where everything broke down regularly had taught him that most impossible challenges just needed someone willing to try unconventional solutions. He pulled out his communication device and sent messages to 3 of the best problem solvers he knew. Paula Martinez could fix any machine ever built. Ben Carter understood alien psychology better than most aliens, and Diane Harper had never met a dangerous situation she couldn't navigate. Within an hour, his team was assembled and ready to depart for Nebula 7. As their ship left Harmony Station, Rex couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of the situation. Humanity was about to prove itself worthy of galactic civilization by doing exactly what humans did best, ignoring conventional wisdom and trying something that sounded completely crazy. The universe was about to learn why you should never underestimate a species that considered "hold my beer" to be a reasonable preface to solving impossible problems. 3 days into hyperspace travel, Rex Sullivan's ship dropped out of warp at the edge of Nebula 7, where space itself seemed to writhe in agony. The normally beautiful stellar nursery had become a nightmare of twisted radiation patterns and psychic interference that made most species physically ill, just from proximity. Paula Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead as she monitored the engine readings from her position at the engineering console. The chief engineer had seen some strange phenomena during her career, but nothing quite like the way their ship systems were responding to the environment. Shields are holding, but I'm getting feedback loops in the neural interface circuits, she reported while making rapid adjustments. Whatever's causing this mess is affecting anything with complex processing patterns. Dr. Ben Carter looked up from his xenobiology station, where he had been analyzing the psychic emanations that were reportedly driving other species insane. The Ethereal Collective has been studying this problem for 50 years using meditation techniques and telepathic resonance mapping. They believe the screaming represents some form of cosmic spiritual trauma. Pilot Diane Harper snorted with amusement from the helm. 50 years of meditation and they still haven't figured it out. Maybe they need to try something more direct. Through the view screen, they could see the 3 star systems at the heart of Nebula 7 burning with unnatural colors that hurt to look at directly. The stars pulsed in rhythm with waves of psychic energy that crashed against their ship's mental shielding. Like ocean waves, Rex studied the sensor data while sipping coffee from a metal cup that rattled slightly from the stellar interference. Paula, what do you make of these energy patterns? The stars themselves seem stable, but there's something else mixed in with their normal output. The engineer highlighted several anomalous readings on her display. Boss, these aren't coming from the stars. Fusion cores. The emanations originate deeper inside the stellar mass, but they're not following normal nuclear physics. They pulse like biological rhythms. Ben leaned forward with sudden interest. Biological rhythms? You mean like heartbeats or breathing? Patterns? More like distress calls. Paula replied grimly. Whatever's inside those stars is trying to communicate, but the message is being filtered through millions of tons of plasma and radiation. Rex felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. In his mind, show me the spectral analysis of the psychic emanations, Ben. What specific mental effects are other species reporting? The xenobiologist pulled up reports from previous expedition teams, extreme anxiety, feelings of being trapped, claustrophobia, and an overwhelming sense that something is dying. Most crews have to retreat within hours or risk permanent psychological damage. Diane plotted their course toward the nearest star system, while keeping one eye on the psychic interference readings. Sounds like someone's been buried alive and they're screaming for help. Rex nodded slowly as understanding dawned. That's exactly what this is. Paula, can you modify our sensors to penetrate stellar cores? I want to know what's really inside those stars. The engineer worked frantically at her console, adapting their deep space scanning equipment to peer through layers of burning plasma. This is going to take some creative rewiring, but I think I can boost our penetration depth. While Paula modified their sensors, Ben continued analyzing the psychic patterns for clues about what kind of entities might be trapped inside stellar furnaces. Boss, if something's actually alive in there, it would have to be incredibly ancient and unimaginably powerful. An hour later, Paula activated the modified scanner array and their view screen filled with impossible images. The 3 stars contained massive crystalline structures that pulsed with their own internal light. Living geometric patterns, twisted and writhed within the nuclear fires like cosmic prisoners. Those are stellar hearts, Ben whispered in amazement. I've read theoretical papers about crystalline entities that might have evolved in the early universe when physics worked differently. They're supposed to be myths. Rex examined the structures through their enhanced sensors. Each stellar heart was roughly the size of a small moon, composed of materials that somehow remained solid despite the incredible temperatures surrounding them. They're not myths anymore, Ben, and they're definitely not happy about their current situation, Rex said grimly. Paula, what would it take to extract those things from the stellar cores? The engineer stared at him in disbelief. Boss, you're talking about performing surgery on 3 different stars simultaneously. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. What if we didn't extract them? Diane suggested from the pilot's seat. What if we just gave them enough juice to break free on their own? Rex smiled at his pilot's unconventional thinking. Explain that idea, Diane. Look at the way they're positioned inside the stars, she said, highlighting the tactical display. They're not randomly distributed. They're arranged, like they're trying to push outward, but they don't have enough power to overcome the gravitational forces holding them in place. Paula caught on immediately, so we give them a boost. A massive energy surge delivered at precisely the right moment. To help them break through the stellar surface, Ben looked skeptical. The ethereal collective has been trying gentle telepathic contact for decades. What makes you think a brute force approach will work better? Because sometimes the gentle approach isn't what the patient needs, Rex replied. If someone's drowning, you don't meditate about their spiritual connection to water. You throw them a rope and pull. The team spent the next 6 hours rigging what Paula cheerfully called a stellar defibrillator, using spare fusion cores from their cargo hold and every power coupling they could safely remove from non-essential systems. The plan was insanely dangerous even by human standards. They would position their ship between the 3 star systems and simultaneously discharge massive energy bursts at each stellar heart. The timing had to be perfect or they risked destabilizing the stars themselves. Ethereal collective ships are maintaining safe distance and transmitting warnings about our reckless approach, Diane reported as she maneuvered them into position. They think we're going to make the situation worse. They might be right, Rex admitted, but 50 years of their careful approach hasn't helped those entities, and I don't think they can wait much longer. Paula armed the improvised defibrillator system while monitoring power levels across their ship. Boss, I'm reading massive energy buildups in all 3 stars. The stellar hearts are responding to our presence somehow. Through the view screen, they could see the stars pulsing more rapidly, as if the trapped entities sensed that rescue might finally be possible. The psychic emanations grew stronger, but the tone shifted from despair to desperate hope. On my mark, Rex announced, taking manual control of the firing sequence. Paula, give me everything we've got. Diane, be ready to get us out of here fast if this goes wrong. He targeted the first stellar heart and fired a concentrated beam of pure energy that struck the crystalline structure like cosmic lightning. The star flared blindingly bright as the entity inside began pushing against its prison with renewed strength. Rex quickly targeted the second and third stars, delivering precisely timed energy bursts that synchronized. With the creature's own escape attempts, the stellar hearts began resonating with each other, creating harmonic frequencies that amplified their combined power. It's working, Ben shouted over the alarms. They're breaking free. The first star suddenly split open like a flower blooming as a massive crystalline entity emerged from its core. The stellar heart was beautiful beyond description, a living jewel the size of a city that sang with pure joy as it tasted freedom for the first time in millennia. The other 2 stars followed suit, birthing their own crystalline inhabitants in spectacular displays of light and energy. The 3 stellar hearts danced around each other in complex patterns, while singing harmonies that made the psychic screaming stop completely. Sensors show the psychic interference has dropped to background levels, Paula reported with relief. The screaming has been replaced by what I can only describe as cosmic music. Rex watched the ancient entities celebrate their freedom and felt a deep satisfaction at having solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for decades. Sometimes the solution isn't about understanding every detail of the problem. Sometimes you just need to help someone break free. Capcut. Ethereal collective ships approached cautiously, transmitting messages of amazement and gratitude. Their meditation techniques had been trying to communicate with the stellar hearts, but they had never considered that the entities might simply need physical assistance to escape their stellar prisons. How did you know to try a direct energy transfer approach? One of the ethereal commanders asked during the debriefing. Rex shrugged. We didn't know for certain, but when someone's trapped and screaming for help, you don't spend 50 years analyzing their emotional state. You help them get unstuck and worry about the details later. As their ship departed Nebula 7, the team could see the 3 stellar hearts beginning to construct something new. In the space between the now quiet stars, the ancient entities were finally free to resume whatever cosmic purpose they had been pursuing before their imprisonment. "1 down, 2 to go," Rex said, settling back in his command chair. "Paula, how long? Until we reach planet Recursion?" The engineer checked their navigation computer. 48 hours, boss, assuming we don't run into any more impossible problems along the way." Diane laughed from the pilot's seat. "Since when do we ever get that lucky?" Rex smiled and raised his coffee cup in a toast. "Here's to solving impossible problems the human way. When in doubt, apply more energy and see what breaks loose." The Valorians would have to acknowledge that humanity had successfully resolved the first challenge, but Rex knew they would dismiss it as another lucky accident. The real test would come when they reached the infinite maze where brute force solutions might not be enough. But Rex had confidence in his team's ability to find unconventional answers to any problem, no matter how impossible it seemed. After all, they were humans, and humans specialized in making the impossible look easy. Planet Recursion hung in space like a geometric nightmare wrapped in probability equations that made normal space-time fold back on itself. The world's surface appeared to shift and change whenever Rex Sullivan tried to focus on specific features through his ship's view screen. Dr. Ben Carter studied the scanner readings with growing fascination as their vessel approached the planet's atmosphere. "Boss, the logical hierarchs have been mapping this maze for over 2 centuries. And their current mathematical model requires 17 dimensions to describe the spatial relationships." Paula Martinez shook her head while reviewing the technical specifications provided by previous expedition teams. "According to these reports, the maze reconfigures itself every time someone enters, following patterns that defy conventional geometry. Teams have been lost for decades, inside corridors that shouldn't exist." Pilot Diane Harper examined the orbital traffic around planet Recursion, where dozens of ships from various species waited in frustration. "Looks like half the galaxy has taken a shot at this puzzle and given up. The logical hierarchs have research vessels stationed at every possible entry point." Rex sipped his coffee while studying the massive data files that the hierarchs had transmitted to their ship. Thousands of pages of equations, probability matrices, and dimensional analyses filled their computer systems, representing centuries of collaborative intellectual effort. "Paula, can you summarize what all these calculations are actually trying to accomplish?" he asked, while scrolling through incomprehensible mathematical formulas. The engineer highlighted key sections of the research data. "The hierarchs believe the maze operates according to quantum probability, cascades modified by observer paradox interactions. They're trying to predict the configuration changes by modeling every possible pathway through multi-dimensional space." Ben looked up from his xenopsychology analysis. "The interesting thing is that different species report completely different maze layouts when they enter. Even teams that go in together get separated and experience unique spatial configurations." Diane plotted their approach vector while keeping one eye on the sensor readings, so the maze changes based on who's inside it. "That sounds like a security system designed to keep specific types of visitors out." Rex finished reviewing the hierarch's work and leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Or maybe it's designed to keep visitors busy while they miss something obvious. Has anyone asked what the maze is protecting?" Paula pulled up architectural scans of the planet's surface structures. The maze covers approximately 60% of the landmass, but there are clear areas at the polar regions. The hierarchs assume those zones are inaccessible, because you have to navigate through the maze to reach them. "What if you don't?" Rex said suddenly. "What if the whole point is that people get so focused on solving the maze that they never consider walking around it?" Ben stared at the planetary map with new understanding. "Boss, are you suggesting that the maze is just a distraction? A really elaborate way to keep curious visitors occupied while they ignore the simple solution?" Rex nodded. "Think about it. Every species that encounters this planet immediately becomes fascinated by the mathematical complexity. They spend years trying to crack the code instead of asking basic questions like why the maze exists or what happens if you ignore it completely." Diane began calculating orbital mechanics for polar approach vectors. "I can put us down in the northern clear zone without going anywhere near the maze proper. The hierarchs won't like it, but they can't stop us from trying." The human team descended through planet Recursion's atmosphere while monitoring communications from the logical hierarchs, who were transmitting increasingly urgent warnings about unauthorized approach patterns. Their ship touched down on a plain of crystalline sand just outside the maze's northern boundary. Rex led his team on foot toward the maze's entrance, where they found themselves facing a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions. The walls shifted subtly when viewed directly, but appeared stable in peripheral vision. Standard procedure according to the research files is to map every junction and mark your path with quantum beacons, Paula said while examining the high-tech equipment previous expeditions had used. Rex pulled out a piece of chalk from his pocket and drew an arrow on the wall pointing back toward their ship. I prefer the low-tech approach, Paula. When you're lost in a maze, you pick a rule and stick to it. Ben studied the corridor branching patterns. What kind of rule, boss? The mathematical models suggest that consistent navigation strategies actually make the maze more complex. The left-hand rule. Rex replied simply, you put your left hand on the wall and keep it there no matter what happens. Eventually, you'll either find the exit or return to where you started. It works in every maze ever built. Diane looked skeptical. Boss, this maze supposedly defies conventional geometry. What if the left-hand rule doesn't apply to impossible spatial configurations? Rex grinned. Then we'll find out. The hard way. But I'm betting that whoever built this place was counting on visitors being too sophisticated to try something that simple. The team began walking through the maze with Rex, keeping his left hand pressed against the wall while the others followed close behind. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that made their inner ears protest, but Rex never lifted his hand from the guiding surface. After 20 minutes of walking, they encountered their first spatial anomaly when the corridor seemed to loop back on itself, creating a section where the floor became the ceiling. The team found themselves walking upside down without feeling any change in gravity. This is impossible, Paula muttered while watching their boot prints appear on what used to be the ceiling. The physics modeling for this section alone would require quantum gravitational field equations. Rex kept his left hand on what he arbitrarily decided was still the wall. Maybe it's impossible, but we're still making progress. The maze wants us to stop and analyze what's happening, but we're just going to keep walking. They continued deeper into the maze structure, encountering increasingly bizarre spatial configurations, corridors that existed only when viewed from certain angles, passages that led through their own beginning, and junction points where multiple versions of the same hallway intersected. Ben documented each anomaly with scientific fascination. Boss, I think the maze is actually testing our preconceptions about reality. Every time we encounter something impossible, it's checking to see if we'll abandon our simple navigation strategy. 20 minutes later, they found themselves back at the maze entrance after having walked in what felt like a straight line. Rex examined the chalk arrow he had drawn earlier and nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. We've mapped the entire outer perimeter. Now we know the maze has definite boundaries and our rule works, despite the spatial tricks, he announced. Diane looked confused. But boss, we didn't find any exit or reach any central location. We just walked in a big circle. Rex smiled. That's because we started from the wrong entrance. Come on, I want to try something. The team walked around the maze's exterior boundary until they reached what appeared to be a maintenance access point, hidden behind an overgrown section of wall. Rex examined the simple mechanical lock that secured the entrance. Paula, do you have anything that can open this lock? It looks like standard galactic hardware, nothing fancy. The engineer produced a universal access tool and quickly bypassed the locking mechanism. The door opened to reveal a short corridor that led directly to the center of the maze complex. Inside, they found a vast chamber containing what appeared to be a massive gaming console complete with holographic displays and input controls. The screens showed real-time views of various expedition teams wandering through the maze corridors. It's a game, Ben said in amazement. The entire maze is some kind of entertainment system designed to create navigational puzzles for visitors. Rex examined the control interface, which had been left in an active state. Look at these settings. The maze difficulty is set to maximum complexity, with adaptive response patterns enabled. Whoever was playing this game wanted the ultimate challenge. Paula studied the technical specifications displayed on the console. Boss, according to this readout, the maze system has been running continuously for over 300 years. Someone started a game and never finished it. Diane looked at the various control options available on the gaming interface. What happens if we just turn it off? Rex found what appeared to be a reset button and pressed it without hesitation. The holographic displays flickered, and the maze configuration began reverting to its original simple layout. Throughout the structure, walls shifted and passages straightened as the complex spatial anomalies dissolved. Within minutes, the maze had transformed from an impossible navigational nightmare into a straightforward path system that anyone could walk through easily. The trapped expedition teams began emerging from exit points they hadn't noticed before, looking confused but unharmed. The logical hierarchs are transmitting requests for detailed technical explanations, Diane reported from her communication station. They want to understand how we solved their centuries-old mathematical puzzle. Rex picked up the communication device. We didn't solve your puzzle, we just turned off the game that was creating the puzzle in the first place. Sometimes the answer isn't more complex mathematics, sometimes it's finding the off switch. The response from the hierarchs was a long silence followed by what could only be described as collective mathematical embarrassment. Their centuries of sophisticated analysis had been applied to what was essentially an alien video game that got stuck in demo mode. Ben discovered additional information in the gaming system's database. Boss, this maze was built by a species called the Playground Builders. They created entertainment complexes throughout this sector before they evolved beyond physical existence. Paula examined the technical documentation. The whole system was designed to provide intellectual challenges for visiting species, but it was never meant to be permanently active. Someone accidentally triggered the infinite play mode. Rex shut down the gaming console and watched the maze complete its transformation back to a simple walking path. Well, that's another impossible problem solved through the application of basic common sense. As their ship departed planet Recursion, Rex could see the former maze now serving as a pleasant park, where visitors could walk safely through geometric gardens. The logical hierarchs were beginning the long process of revising their mathematical models to account for the possibility that some problems don't require sophisticated solutions. 2 down, 1 to go, Rex announced, while settling back in his command chair. Diane set course for the war zone between the Apex Hunters' crystal communes and Void Wanderers. Paula checked their supplies and equipment status. Boss, the final challenge involves ending a 3-way war that has resisted diplomatic solutions for 2 centuries. What makes you think we can succeed where professional negotiators have failed? Rex smiled confidently. Because professional negotiators probably never thought to invite everyone to a bar and see what happens when they're all relaxed enough to actually talk to each other. The universe was about to learn that sometimes the most complex problems required the simplest human solution. Honest communication, lubricated by the universal solvent of alcohol, war raged across 3 star systems as Rex Sullivan's ship approached the contested border zone between species that had been fighting for over 200 years. The tactical display showed a complex web of battle formations, patrol routes, and defensive positions that shifted constantly as the 3-way conflict consumed resources and lives. Dr. Ben Carter studied intelligence reports about the warring species while shaking his head in disbelief. Boss, the Apex Hunters are aggressive predators who respect only strength and direct confrontation. Their entire culture revolves around proving dominance through combat. Paula Martinez highlighted different sections of the military analysis. The crystal communes operate as hive-minded collectives that make every decision through consensus and harmony. They consider individual action without group approval to be a form of mental illness. Pilot Diane Harper plotted their course carefully to avoid active combat zones while monitoring tactical communications. The Void Wanderers are nomadic loners who value personal freedom above everything, else they refuse to acknowledge any authority beyond their own individual judgment. Rex sipped his coffee while reviewing failed peace negotiations that filled several database archives. 2 centuries of professional diplomats have tried everything: formal treaties, economic partnerships, territorial divisions, and cultural exchange programs. Nothing worked because each species operates from completely incompatible philosophical foundations. The human team approached the neutral space station. That served as the designated meeting point for their diplomatic intervention. The facility had been specifically constructed for peace negotiations between the three species and featured separate docking areas designed to accommodate their different psychological needs. Council of Mediation representatives are requesting our credentials and diplomatic protocols, Diane reported as they received standard bureaucratic challenges. They want to know what authority we have to intervene in an established territorial dispute. Rex activated the communication system. This is Captain Rex Sullivan representing humanity's problem-solving initiative. We're here to try something different. The response came from a weary-sounding coordinator who had probably overseen dozens of failed peace attempts. Captain Sullivan, the mediation protocols for this conflict are extremely complex. Each species requires specific environmental conditions, ceremonial procedures, and cultural accommodations. Any deviation from established diplomatic frameworks will result in immediate walkout. Understood, Rex replied. We'll need complete access to your recreational facilities, and I want to requisition your food service areas for a cultural exchange event. Paula looked at him with concern. Boss, are you planning what I think you're planning? Rex nodded. We're going to throw a party, Ben. What did your research tell you about the biochemistry of these three species? Do any of them produce or consume alcohol? Analogs. The xenobiologist consulted his files with growing excitement. Actually, yes, all three species have evolutionary relationships with fermentation processes. The apex hunters use combat stimulants that are essentially concentrated ethanol. The crystal communes employ harmony enhancers that work similarly to human alcohol. And the void wanderers have traditional ritual intoxicants that help them achieve individual enlightenment states. Diane began calculating logistics for their unconventional, diplomatic approach. So you want to get three warring species drunk and see if they start talking instead of fighting? Not drunk exactly, Rex clarified, but relaxed enough to have honest conversations instead of following rigid diplomatic scripts. People say things when they're comfortable that they'd never admit in formal negotiations. The team spent 6 hours converting the station's main conference facility into what could only be described as the galaxy's first interspecies social club. They modified the environmental controls to accommodate all three species' atmospheric requirements and set up serving areas stocked with appropriate intoxicants for each group. Rex sent careful invitations to representatives of each species, framing the event as an informal cultural exchange rather than official peace negotiations. He specifically avoided using diplomatic language that might trigger their established hostility patterns. The apex hunters arrived first, bringing a delegation of warriors who expected either combat or surrender from their enemies. The crystal communes sent a consensus group that moved and spoke in perfect synchronization. The void wanderers appeared individually, each one maintaining careful distance from the others. Welcome, everyone, Rex announced from behind an improvised bar. Before we start talking about territory or resources or ancient grievances, I thought we might learn something about each other as people instead of species. The initial atmosphere was predictably tense as representatives from each group eyed their traditional enemies with suspicion. Rex began serving drinks customized for each species' biochemistry while maintaining casual conversation about neutral topics. Commander Falk, tell me about Apex Hunter music. I've heard your war songs carry across entire battlefields, Rex said while pouring the Predator's preferred combat stimulant. The surprised warrior found himself describing traditional apex hunting rhythms and their cultural significance. The alcohol analog began affecting his aggressive posture, making him more communicative than threatening. Rex turned to the crystal commune speakers. I'm curious about your consensus decision-making process. How do you coordinate the thoughts of millions of individuals into unified action? The hive-minded representatives began explaining their harmonic synchronization techniques, while their inhibitions lowered under the influence of their harmony enhancers. They started speaking as individuals rather than delivering prepared collective statements. Captain Nix, what's it like to explore the void between stars with complete freedom? Rex asked one of the Wanderer delegates. Most species need the security of established territories, but you choose isolation. The nomadic captain began sharing stories of discovery and adventure, while the ritual intoxicants helped her overcome her natural suspicion of organized social interaction. Within 2 hours, the carefully maintained hostilities began dissolving, as representatives from all 3 species found themselves engaged in genuine conversations. The apex hunters discovered that crystal commune consensus building required incredible, individual courage. The communes learned that void wanderer isolation came from deep philosophical principles rather than antisocial behavior. The wanderers realized that apex hunter aggression masked sophisticated cultural values. "Wait a moment," Commander Valk said suddenly. "Are we fighting over the Kepler mining rights in the disputed systems?" The crystal commune speakers nodded in unison. "Our collectives require those mineral resources for habitat construction. The territories contain rare elements essential for our expansion." Captain Nix looked confused. "But those systems are in the void lanes my people use for deep space navigation. We need unrestricted passage through that region for our traditional migration routes." Rex leaned forward with interest. "So the apex hunters want to mine the planets, the crystal communes want the asteroid resources, and the void wanderers want safe passage through the shipping lanes." Dr. Ben Carter quietly accessed the territorial analysis files. "Boss, according to these surveys, there's no actual overlap between their requirements. The hunters want terrestrial mining rights, the communes want asteroid belt materials, and the wanderers just need navigation guarantees." Paula laughed. From her position at the engineering station, "You mean this whole war started because nobody bothered to ask exactly what each species actually wanted from those systems?" The 3 delegations stared at each other in growing amazement as the reality of their situation became clear. 2 centuries of warfare had been fought over a misunderstanding that could have been resolved with a simple conversation about resource allocation. The formal diplomatic protocols never allowed for direct resource negotiation. The Crystal Commune speakers admitted, "Our mediation sessions focused on territorial sovereignty and cultural recognition rather than practical distribution of materials." Commander Valk struck the table with his fist, but the gesture seemed more frustrated than aggressive. "The Council of Mediation insisted we negotiate through intermediaries following established precedent. We were never permitted to speak directly about our actual needs." Captain Nix nodded agreement. Every peace conference involved weeks of ceremonial preparation and formal presentations. Nobody ever asked what we really wanted, just whether we would accept predetermined territorial divisions. Rex refilled everyone's drinks while processing this revelation. "So the professional diplomats created a system that prevented you from having the conversations you needed to have. They were so focused on following proper procedures that they never addressed the actual problem." Ben consulted his diplomatic archives. "Boss, the mediation protocols for multi-species conflicts require separate negotiation tracks for territorial sovereignty, resource allocation, cultural recognition, and trade relationships. The system is designed to prevent any single issue from derailing the entire process. But that means you can spend decades negotiating territorial boundaries without ever discussing why you want the territory in the first place," Diane observed. "It's like arguing about who gets to sit in a chair without asking why anyone wants to sit down." The alcohol analogs had created an atmosphere where all 3 species could think clearly about their situation without the emotional baggage of centuries of warfare. The apex hunters realized they had been fighting for mining rights they could easily share. The crystal communes understood that asteroid belt resources were abundant enough for multiple users. The void wanderers recognized that their navigation needs could be accommodated without restricting anyone else's activities. "This is embarrassing," Commander Valk admitted. "My people have been launching raids against crystal habitats to prevent them from accessing mining systems that we didn't even want to use, for the same purposes." The commune speakers harmonized briefly before responding. "Our collectives have been disrupting void navigation routes to deny the wanderers strategic mobility in conflicts that had nothing to do with our actual resource requirements." Captain Nix shook her head ruefully. "And my people have been attacking hunter expeditions to protect territory that we only needed to travel through, not occupy permanently." Rex pulled out a simple datapad and began sketching a basic resource allocation chart. Let me see if I understand this correctly. The Kepler systems contain terrestrial planets suitable for mining asteroid belts rich in construction materials and clear space lanes for navigation. He showed the rough diagram to all three delegations. What if the Apex Hunters got exclusive mining rights to the planets, the Crystal Communes got primary access to the asteroid resources, and the Void Wanderers got guaranteed safe passage through the shipping lanes? The three species studied the proposal with growing excitement as they realized how simple the solution actually was. Each group would get everything they actually needed without preventing the others from pursuing their own objectives. We would need formal agreements about environmental protection during mining operations, the commune speakers noted, and coordination protocols for sharing orbital space around the planets. Commander Valk nodded. The Hunters require assurance that our mining installations won't be attacked during vulnerable extraction phases, and we need crystal technology for efficient ore processing. Captain Nix added, the Wanderers can provide navigation services and system security in exchange for trade, access, and refueling rights. Within hours, the three species had negotiated a comprehensive cooperation agreement that addressed all their practical needs. They established joint mining ventures that combined Apex Hunter extraction techniques with Crystal Commune processing efficiency. Void Wanderer navigation expertise would ensure safe transport of materials while their ships provided security for the shared operations. I can't believe we solved this in one evening, Commander Valk said. While signing the preliminary accords, 200 years of warfare over a problem that required basic resource sharing. The Crystal Communes harmonized in agreement. Our collectives are already calculating the efficiency improvements from cooperative operations. The combined productivity will exceed what any of us could achieve through individual efforts. Captain Nix raised her glass in a toast to the humans who taught us that sometimes the best diplomacy involves sitting down together and asking what everyone actually wants. Rex smiled as he watched former enemies planning joint ventures and cultural exchanges. The professional diplomats made this too complicated because they assumed you needed sophisticated procedures to handle sophisticated problems. But most conflicts come down to practical questions about who gets what and whether there's enough to go around. Ben documented the successful negotiations for his xenopsychology research. Boss, this confirms your theory about alcohol being a universal social lubricant. All three species became more cooperative and creative when their inhibitions were reduced. Paula finished setting up the communication systems that would allow the three species to maintain direct contact. The formal treaty signing is scheduled for tomorrow, but they're already planning joint exploration missions to identify additional resource opportunities. Diane plotted their departure course while monitoring the peaceful communications between former enemies. One more impossible problem solved through the application of basic human common sense. As their ship left the neutral station, Rex could see vessels from all three species beginning cooperative patrols of their shared territories. The war that had raged for 2 centuries ended not through complex diplomatic maneuvering but through honest conversation between people who discovered they wanted different things from the same places. 3 for 3, Rex announced. With satisfaction, I wonder how Admiral Zorin is going to explain this to the Valorian Empire. The answer to that question would determine whether humanity's unconventional problem-solving methods would be accepted by galactic civilization or dismissed as dangerous precedent. But Rex had confidence that the results would speak for themselves. After all, the universe was full of impossible problems, waiting for someone willing to try the simple solution that everyone else had overlooked: harmony. Station felt different when Rex Sullivan returned to face Admiral Kef Zorin's judgment. The massive diplomatic hub buzzed with excited conversations about humanity's recent achievements as news of the 3 impossible solutions spread throughout galactic civilization. Admiral Zorin waited in the same cantina where their confrontation had begun, but his demeanor had changed from arrogant contempt to something approaching respectful wariness. The Valorian commander sat alone at a corner table, studying datapads filled with reports about human problem-solving methods. Captain Sullivan, Zorin said formally, as Rex approached. The Valorian Empire acknowledges that humanity has successfully completed all 3 challenges, The Stellar Hearts. Seeing freely in Nebula 7, the infinite maze has been resolved and peace exists between the warring species. Rex ordered his usual whiskey and sat down across from the alien admiral. You don't sound very happy about it, Admiral. I thought Valorians appreciated military efficiency. Zoran's four eyes regarded the human with complex emotions. Efficiency, yes, but your methods defy everything we understand about proper problem-solving protocols. Your team ignored established scientific procedures, diplomatic frameworks, and logical analysis techniques. And yet the problems got solved, Rex replied calmly. Sometimes the established procedures are part of what keeps problems from getting solved. The Admiral leaned forward with genuine curiosity, replacing his former hostility. That is precisely what troubles the Valorian High Command Captain Sullivan. We have been secretly studying humanity since your species achieved faster-than-light travel, trying to understand what makes your problem-solving methods so effective. Rex raised an eyebrow at this revelation. Secretly studying us, Admiral? That sounds like you were expecting us to fail these challenges. Zoran activated a privacy shield around their table before continuing. The 3 challenges were not randomly selected, Captain. They were real problems that had stumped our greatest minds along with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Each crisis represented a fundamental pillar of galactic society. The Admiral pulled up holographic displays showing detailed analyses of the 3 challenges. The screaming stars represented scientific advancement, the pinnacle of our ability to understand and manipulate cosmic phenomena. The infinite maze embodied logical analysis, our capacity for mathematical reasoning and systematic problem-solving. The 3-way war tested diplomatic sophistication, our skill at resolving complex social conflicts. Rex sipped his whiskey while studying the Valorian research data. You're saying these weren't just random, impossible problems, but specific tests of different types of intelligence? Exactly, Zoran confirmed. The Valorian Empire has built our civilization on the foundation of scientific rigor, logical precision, and diplomatic complexity. We assumed that any species capable of solving these challenges would need to surpass our achievements in each area. Paula Martinez joined them at the table, carrying her own drink and looking curious about the private conversation. Boss, the station computers are buzzing with Valorian research files about human psychology and problem-solving patterns. It looks like they've been analyzing us for decades. Dr. Ben Carter and pilot Diane Harper arrived together, having heard about the meeting through station communications. Both looked intrigued by the opportunity to understand Valorian motivations. Admiral Zoran was just explaining how the 3 challenges were designed to test specific types of advanced thinking, Rex said by way of introduction. Zoran nodded to the assembled human team. Your species succeeded not by surpassing our capabilities, but by approaching the problems from directions we never considered. The Stellar Hearts required direct physical intervention rather than complex theoretical analysis. The infinite maze was solved by ignoring its complexity rather than understanding it. The diplomatic crisis ended through informal social interaction rather than formal negotiation protocols. Ben leaned forward with professional interest. So our solutions worked because we didn't know enough to be intimidated by the problems. We tried simple approaches because we didn't understand why they wouldn't work. More than that, Zoran replied. Your solutions worked because your species has retained cognitive flexibility that advanced civilizations tend to lose. The Valorian Empire has become so sophisticated in our thinking that we cannot conceive of simple solutions to complex problems. Diane looked puzzled. You mean, you've gotten too smart for your own good? Admiral. Zoran's expression showed something resembling pain. In a sense, yes. Our educational systems train individuals to analyze problems using established frameworks. Our scientific institutions require peer review and theoretical validation before attempting practical solutions. Our diplomatic corps follows protocols that have been refined over millennia. Paula, understanding dawned on her face. But all that sophistication creates mental barriers that prevent you from trying approaches that seem too simple or obvious. Precisely, the Admiral confirmed. When confronted with the Stellar Hearts, Our scientists spent decades developing mathematical models to understand their psychic emanations. Your team simply asked what the entities needed and provided direct assistance. Rex nodded thoughtfully. And your mathematicians spent centuries analyzing the infinite maze's spatial properties while we just turned off the game that was creating the maze. The diplomatic crisis represents the most troubling example, Zoran continued. Our negotiation specialists created elaborate protocols to manage cultural differences, while you invited everyone to share drinks and discuss their actual needs informally. Ben consulted his xenopsychology notes. Admiral, are you saying that advanced civilizations systematically train themselves out of the ability to think creatively? Zoran activated another data display showing comparative studies of problem-solving approaches across different species. The evidence suggests that intellectual advancement creates cognitive constraints. Highly educated individuals become invested in demonstrating their sophisticated knowledge rather than pursuing effective solutions. It's like the old saying about experts knowing more and more about less and less until they know everything about nothing, Diane observed. Rex studied the Valorian research with growing understanding. You've been analyzing human problem-solving because you want to learn how to think like us. The Valorian High Command has reached that conclusion, Zoran admitted. Our empire spans thousands of worlds and commands resources beyond most species' comprehension, but we have become so focused on maintaining our sophisticated systems that we have lost the ability to adapt when those systems encounter problems they weren't designed to handle. Paula looked at the complexity of Valorian technology documentation. Your engineering solutions require teams of specialists and months of planning, while humans jury-rig repairs with whatever's available and hope for the best. And somehow your improvised solutions often work better than our carefully planned approaches, Zoran said with visible frustration. This should not be possible according to any rational analysis. Ben smiled with sudden insight. But Admiral, rational analysis might be exactly what's limiting your effectiveness. When you spend too much time analyzing a problem, you can miss opportunities to simply solve it. Rex finished his whiskey and leaned back in his chair. So what does the Valorian Empire want from humanity, Admiral? Now that you've acknowledged our effectiveness? Zoran took a deep breath before making what was clearly a difficult request. The High Command wishes to propose a formal alliance. Captain Sullivan. We want to establish joint problem-solving initiatives where Valorian resources and human creativity can be combined. You want us to teach your people how to think like humans, Diane said with amusement. We want to learn how to maintain cognitive flexibility while advancing technologically, Zoran clarified. Your species represents something unique in galactic civilization, the ability to remain adaptable and creative despite achieving interstellar travel. Paula grinned. You want us to show you how to be sophisticated enough to handle complex problems, but primitive enough to try simple solutions. Rex considered the proposal while watching the diverse crowd of aliens conducting business throughout the cantina. What kind of alliance are we talking about, Admiral? Joint research projects, cultural exchanges, military cooperation? All of those and more, Zoran replied. The Valorian Empire would provide advanced technology and vast resources while human teams would lead problem-solving efforts for challenges that stump our conventional approaches. Ben looked excited by the research possibilities. Boss, this could revolutionize how galactic civilization handles crisis situations. Instead of defaulting to complex solutions, we could try simple approaches first. Rex smiled at his team before turning back to the Valorian. Admiral, I accept your alliance proposal on one condition. Name your terms, Captain. All future diplomatic meetings have to include beer, Rex said with a straight face. I've learned that most problems become more manageable when everyone involved is relaxed enough to admit they don't know everything. Zoran stared at the human for a moment before breaking into what might have been the first genuine laugh of his military career. Captain Sullivan, I believe that arrangement will be acceptable to the High Command. As they shook hands to seal the agreement, Rex realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic politics. They had gained the respect and partnership of one of the most powerful civilizations. in known space not through demonstrations of superior technology or military might, but by proving that sometimes the best solution to any problem was to try the approach that everyone else thought was too simple to work. The universe was about to discover that human creativity combined with alien resources could solve problems that neither could handle alone. And it all started because someone was willing to hold a beer and try something different. 6 months after the Valorian alliance, Rex Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed problem-solving station, watching a steady stream of ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each vessel carried delegations seeking help with challenges that had stumped their civilizations for years or decades or centuries. The human problem-solving initiative had exceeded everyone's expectations, including Rex's own. What started as a drunken bet in a cantina had evolved into the most requested service in civilized space. Paula Martinez approached carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a data pad filled with incoming requests. "Boss, we've got 17 new cases this week. A planet-wide computer virus that's paralyzed the synthetic collective for 3 months. A philosophical paradox that has the contemplative order stuck in infinite logical loops, and a traffic jam spanning 3 solar systems that nobody can figure out how to clear." Dr. Ben Carter emerged from his expanded xenopsychology laboratory, where he had been studying the psychological barriers that prevented advanced species from attempting simple solutions. "Rex, the pattern analysis is fascinating. Advanced civilizations consistently overcomplicate problems that have straightforward answers. It's like they've trained themselves to ignore obvious solutions." Pilot Diane Harper joined them, carrying her own coffee and looking satisfied with another successful mission. "Just got back from the crystalline hegemony where we fixed their mining dispute by pointing out that they were arguing over territory that none of them actually wanted to live on. 3 centuries of conflict resolved when someone asked why they were fighting instead of how to fight better." Rex smiled as he reviewed the success reports that had been accumulating. Since the initiative launched, the universe keeps providing us with impossible problems that turn out to be perfectly solvable once you ignore what makes them impossible. The observation deck's communication system activated with an incoming priority message. "Captain Sullivan, this is Admiral Zoran transmitting from Valorian Command. We have a situation that requires immediate human consultation." Rex activated the response channel. "What's the problem, Admiral? Have your people forgotten how to think creatively again?" Zoran's image appeared on the holographic display, looking both amused and concerned. "Actually, Captain, the problem is that our people are thinking too creatively. We implemented your suggestion about encouraging unconventional approaches, and now our engineering teams are proposing solutions that violate several laws of physics." Paula laughed. "Sounds like they're getting the hang of human problem-solving methods. What specifically are they trying to do?" "They want to fix a damaged space station by towing it through a black hole to reverse its structural collapse," Zoran replied. "The mathematics suggest this might actually work, but the safety implications are terrifying." Rex nodded thoughtfully. "Admiral, that does sound like something we might try. Have you asked them why they think it would work?" "They claim that if gravitational time dilation can slow aging, then gravitational field manipulation should be able to reverse entropy," Zoran explained. "When I pointed out that this had never been tested, they said that was exactly why it might succeed." Ben looked intrigued by the theoretical implications. "Boss, that's actually not completely insane from a xenophysics perspective. The Valorians might have stumbled onto something genuinely innovative." Diane checked the navigation systems. "We can be at Valorian space in 18 hours if you want to take a look at their crazy black hole repair plan." Rex considered the request while watching. More ships arrive seeking human problem-solving assistance. "Admiral, will head your way, but I want you to remember that sometimes the most dangerous-sounding solutions are the ones that actually work." "That is precisely what concerns me, Captain," Zoran admitted. "The Valorian Empire has spent millennia avoiding dangerous solutions in favor of safe, predictable approaches. Your influence is encouraging risk-taking behaviors that make our safety coordinators extremely nervous." Paula grinned. "Welcome to human problem-solving, Admiral. Sometimes you have to risk everything to fix anything." As their ship departed the problem-solving station, Rex reflected on how dramatically the galaxy had changed since his confrontation with Admiral Zoran. Dozens of species had established problem-solving partnerships with humanity, and the results continued to exceed expectations. The Ethereal Collective had learned to combine their meditation techniques with direct intervention methods, creating hybrid solutions that were both spiritually satisfying and practically effective. The logical hierarchs had developed new mathematical frameworks that incorporated illogical variables like intuition and creative inspiration. The Council of Mediation had revised their diplomatic protocols to include informal social interaction as a standard negotiation tool. Rex were receiving another priority transmission. Diane announced, "This one's coming from the Galactic Core." The communication system activated to reveal an image of space that seemed to writhe with impossible colors and geometric patterns. Human Problem-Solving Initiative. This is Emergency Coordinator Vex transmitting from Reality Stabilization Command. We have a code Omega. Situation that requires immediate consultation. Rex raised an eyebrow at the dramatic classification. Coordinator Vex, what exactly constitutes a code Omega situation? An ancient weapon system has activated near the galactic center and is beginning to unravel the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Vex replied with obvious stress. Our greatest minds have been working on containment strategies for weeks with no success. The weapon appears to be designed to counter any sophisticated approach to stopping it. Ben looked up from his research files. Boss, this sounds like exactly the kind of problem that gets worse the more you analyze it. Paula checked their ship's equipment inventory. We're going to need serious firepower if we're dealing with reality unraveling weapons. Do we have anything that can fix broken space-time? Rex smiled and reached for a fresh beer from the cooling unit. Paula, I'm sure we can improvise something. What we need is the simplest possible approach to an impossibly complex problem. Diane plotted their course toward the galactic center where space itself was reportedly coming apart. Rex, even for us, this sounds like it might be pushing the limits of what duct tape and creative thinking can accomplish. Maybe. Rex agreed. But I've learned that the universe has a sense of humor about these things. The more impossible a problem seems, the more likely it is that someone just needs to find the off switch. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, Rex considered the irony of their situation. Humanity had gained respect throughout the galaxy, not by demonstrating superior technology or advanced knowledge, but by proving that sometimes the best way to solve any problem was to try the approach that everyone else thought was too simple to work. The ancient weapon threatening reality itself would soon discover what every other impossible challenge had learned. There was no problem that couldn't be solved with enough creativity, stubborn determination, and the willingness to try something that sounded absolutely ridiculous. Team meeting in 10 minutes, Rex announced to his crew. We need to figure out how to fix broken reality using whatever we can find in the cargo hold. Paula looked thoughtful. Boss, I've got some spare quantum coils and a reality anchor from our last engineering project. Maybe we can build a space-time wrench. Ben consulted his xenoarchaeology database. If this weapon is truly ancient, it might respond to obsolete shutdown commands. That's assuming it was designed by a species that believed in off-switches. Diane smiled while checking their approach vector. And if all else fails, we can always try the human universal solution for malfunctioning equipment. Rex grinned as he raised his beer in a toast. Which is, turn it off and turn it back on again. His team replied in unison. The galaxy was vast and full of impossible challenges, but humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. There was no problem that couldn't be solved with the right combination of ingenuity, determination, and the willingness to hold someone's beer while attempting something that made everyone else nervous. After all, the universe was a big place, and someone had to keep it running. As their ship raced toward the galactic center where reality itself was supposedly breaking down, Rex felt the familiar excitement of approaching another impossible problem that would soon discover why you should never underestimate a species that considered "hold my beer" to be a reasonable preface to saving the universe. The cosmos was about to learn that sometimes the most complex problems required the simplest human solution. ignore what makes something impossible and focus on what might actually work. And if that failed, they could always try hitting it with a bigger wrench.